Here are our top 3 picks from the first week of spoilers of Lord of the Rings, Tales of Middle-earth, Magic Edition.
Next on Eternal Durdles.
I need more stuff. Can't see any more stuff. But now I go. I'm keeping up with the Joneses.
Hello and welcome to Eternal Durdles. I'm your host, Zach Clark, and with me as always, Phil Blackman. Phil, how you doing?
Bro, I mean, I was not expecting Lord of the Rings to have the spiraling effect on Nerd Card Twitter that it has had. But
oh man, I haven't been more active on Twitter since since I started using Twitter back in like 2008.
All right, let's be real though. I mean, Twitter sucks. Twitter's absolute. It's an absolute hellfest
sure.
shit.
It is definitely a tire fire.
But there are some interesting discussions that happen in the Magic sub Twitter, if you will.
Yeah.
And there are a bunch of cards from Lord of the Rings that are going to be players. Like there's nothing that seems like super egregious. Like I
don't think anything's broken is going to like ruin the format. But there's some great role players here.
There's some really good role players, and I as we've been getting more spoilers, like I don't know Lord of the Rings nearly as closely as you do, but all of the best sets are always the top down flavor sets. Like when they build a set bottom up mechanically, it just never hits the same way that it does when they're just capturing a flavor and then designing to that flavor. You know, it just evokes so much more
outliers
design.
In that are Homelands and Theros.
Yeah. I Homelands. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right.
But I do agree with you. I'd rather have a flavor forward set than a we designed this whole set around morph cards and then try and make it a draft format. Like I'd rather see like good fun story and fun Magic cards that fit narratively into a story. Especially, I mean, like it's not like they were going to top down design or bottom up design Lord of the Rings set, right? Like we obviously we're coming from story down to mechanics.
Yeah, just like doing story things, you just get a bunch of strange things that otherwise nobody would ever become. Like, we're not going to talk about it for legacy purposes, but there's a card called There and Back Again. It's a saga for 3 red. The third chapter is you create Smog, the dragon, a legendary 6/6 with flying and haste, and when it dies, create 14 treasure tokens. At no point are you ever getting the number 14 treasure tokens if you were to design this card straight up?
No, this is not this is, but like, so the 14 is in reference to the 13 dwarves and Bilbo Baggins splitting the treasure of Smog in 14s, 1/14.
Now, the thing though is, like, let's say that card wasn't designed with Lord of the Rings in mind, right? They were like, we're going to build a red dragon saga. It's going to create a legendary dragon. Cool. It's going to do dragon stuff. Cool. And then it's going to make treasures. Yeah. Dragons hoard treasures. We've seen it before. Yeah. They could pick at 14 treasures, just come up with any number, right? It doesn't matter. You functionally infinite mana. If at that point you're making a card, but because it has the story tied to it, it just is so much deeper. Right,
so cool.
The card is pretty basic. Like the chapter 1, the ring tempts you, creature can't block. Chapter 2, search a mountain. Chapter 3, create a token. Like it's very basic stuff, but because it's grounded in the lore, there's a backstory to the card, and so it's just so much deeper of a card than it otherwise would be. And if you have any type of world building for that, even if it's Magic world building, like when they do top down designs like this, it's just so much richer. It's like Kamigawa, right? When we went back to Kamigawa and we're like, oh man, this stuff is all sick because it's all throwbacks. It's all like every card means more than it actually says because of the lore that's been ingrained into it in the story. It's like it's a fantasy story game, and then it puts us in the fantasy. Anyway, I'm jerking off the flavor, but let's get into the legacy cards.
Yeah, well, speaking of flavor, let's talk about the Council of Elrond. The card that I think is going to be the most played card from this set in our format in Legacy is Council's Deliberation. Phil, tell us about Council's Deliberation. What's it do?
So it's a 1 and a blue instant. It says draw card, sweet, and then it has an ability in the graveyard that anytime you scry, if you control an island, you can exile it from your graveyard to draw a card. Now, if you control an island is flavor text.
Yeah.
Right? Like that's just because they're on Riverdale in the story. And that's an island, right?
Yeah. Rivendell.
What did I say?
I got there before the commenters did. Riverdale.
Riverdale. Oh, is that what I said? Rivendell.
Attended by Archie and friends. Rivendell is a place where elves meet.
I'm not gonna say that was me misspeaking. I'm gonna say that's a problem with my diction.
You're actually what you're doing is heralding in the incoming Archie Comics secret lair
Wow.
that we all know is coming.
I mean, at that point, like, we just need some good Archie comic flavor.
Which leads into the Punisher. I'll show everybody right here, the Punisher and Archie comic.
So the deal with Council's Deliberation, if you want to tell the quick backstory of the lore of what this card is.
So this is the Council of Elrond. This is where they determine what to do with the ring. This is after Frodo has been chased by the ring race, and he's been stabbed by the Morgul blade at Weathertop, and they got to get him to Rivendell. So they get him to Rivendell. He recovers because Master Elrond is a master of medicine. So he heals the Morgul wound to an extent. But then they determine what they're going to do with the One Ring from this point on. So you've got the entire Fellowship there, which is not technically yet the Fellowship, and then you've got a couple of members of the other Free Peoples there as well. Sort of a UN of the Lord of the Rings universe.
So let's talk about where it fits in with Legacy. So there were a couple of spots where this could fit in. I think all of them comprise one other deck building concession, which is that in order to scry, the only Legacy playable card with scry is Preordain.
That is the best one to play. I agree.
That is the best one. I literally, like, on the spot right now, I can't. I mean, maybe there are other scry cards, but I cannot think of any that are competitively viable. And Preordain has always been the additional ponder beyond Brainstorm and Ponder. It's the third cantrip of the top cantrips, and it shows up sometimes when people want more than the first 8 cantrips. So it shows up sometimes as a 1 or 2 of Endelver. It shows up in all the combo decks. It is still a playable card. Like, if you see it, it's usually signifying a certain archetype that they're playing. Like, if a player goes turn 1 Volcanic Island, cast Preordain, you're probably putting them on show and tell at this point. Yeah. But it's not unreasonable that they could play a Dragon Rage Channeler the following turn.
Yeah. Or you're playing Vintage, and because you can only have one Ponder and one Brainstorm, you're playing Ponder.
And then you're playing Preordain. Yeah. And Preordain's a 4 of in like every blue Vintage Xerox list. So Council's Deliberation works in that at upfront, instant speed draw a card isn't the worst.
It's fine.
It's fine.
Two mana draw a card is the top of what anyone would be willing to pay for that circa accumulated knowledge, right?
100%. Now imagine if accumulated knowledge was good without needing the second copy. Yeah. That's where Council's Deliberation is in my mind, because when you have AK in your deck, now AK has long since passed its playability in Legacy. I know I try literally like this past week on 90s MTG, I had accumulated knowledge in my deck. Like, I go back
and they recently upgraded that card too, so that in the mirror it doesn't like affect your opponent.
They call it an upgrade. You call it an upgrade. I call it a downgrade. If you're in the AK mirror, the better AK player is going to win that game. Sure. But the idea with, if you have AK in your deck, when you pitch a copy of AK to Force of Will, you sacrifice the power level of all of the other AKs in your deck, right? So it's like you have to take that into consideration in your blue count. But with Council's Deliberation does not require anything other than Preordain being in your deck, really, and it doesn't need to see other copies of itself the way that AK does. Yeah. So Council's Deliberation, you're always going to have an island. Like, you're never not going to have an island. If you're playing Legacy, you're always going to have an island. That's flavor text. So this just sits in your graveyard, and when you cast Preordain, it levels up your Preordain to draw 2 cards. So the power level of that is there's a couple of decks right now that this could slot into and just be a really solid card draw engine. The first is the shit that I like to play, right? Like Tundra, Draw Go style control decks. Play your Preordains, whatever. I'm already interested in more cantrips to begin with. You know, it's like, if we were to lean towards like Mishra's Bauble Predict, if in that same space we could just have Preordain Council's Deliberation, and we're doing similar things.
Yeah, you're already rocking like 20% of your deck or more 30% of your deck is like air to begin with, right?
But the cool thing about this card is that you can also just use this as fodder into your graveyard. Like you can play any amount of stuff that just puts cards into your graveyard and then level up your preordain afterwards without having to cast this on the front half. So if you're playing Blue-Red Delver, right, and you're playing the preordains instead, you could just surveil this to the yard off your DRC, and the value is there. There's a card just sitting in your graveyard waiting to go there. Additionally,
that literally surveil is worth a card exactly at that point.
At that point, you're just dumping a card that for later is going to be good. The other upside in Blue-Red Delver is if you play Preordain with this and exile it from your yard, it incidentally grows your onboard Murktide because it is an instant or sorcery that's leaving your graveyard.
Yeah.
So that's also a relevant, like it's little nickel and diming, but it is levels up in ways that it gives you the card advantage that you are looking for in Blue-Red Delver. Although it's funny, the next card we talk about, I think, is actually going to overhaul the archetype anyway, in a way so that this won't actually see the light of day. But
for what it's worth, I mean, games are won and lost on these margins in Legacy. So growing your Murktide by +1 is oftentimes a weird little thing that just like gets you there or makes it one less turn that your opponent gets to stay in the game.
Well, the thing is, too, in the mirror, it's like if you can grow your Murktides bigger than your opposing Murktides if you're the one playing Council's Deliberation and they're not, right?
Yeah.
Like that sort of thing matters, too. There's also the world where like you can cast this plus Preordain in the same turn to grow your Murktide to get in for a bigger, like in those turns where you go Murktide into Murktide to grow your Murktide to get in for more damage unexpectedly. Like there's those kinds of lines as well. For any other effect, like I was thinking, what other decks would be able to like dump this stuff to the yard without casting it straight up? And one that came to mind was all of the Dak Faden decks that have sort of fallen off the face of the earth. This is another card that, like, if you don't want to stretch your mana to the point where you're just constantly at the mercy of your opponent, and whether or not they disrupt your mana and your colors in any meaningful way, this is another card that you can dump off of your deck or dump off of any of your discard effects that just offers you value from the graveyard without necessarily like hindering your base colors of Grixis, right? The way that like Uro stretches you into green really heavily in a way that's not necessarily advantageous or in a way that your deck otherwise couldn't have. It's not helping your deck in a way that you were soft to. You're already good at dealing with creatures. So I think Council's Deliberation is like a very good role player uncommon that's going to level up this card advantage spot that's sort of glaring now that Expressive Iteration is gone. Like you have the option of Predict, which I still think is playable. AK I think is not playable, and then that's kind of it at 2, right? Like unless you're doing some sort of combo shenanigans, just raw cards, that's kind of it.
One of the things I wanted to talk about with this card is the concept of timing and math with this card. If you're playing Accumulated Knowledge is a perfect example. You have 3 other ways to get that extra card off of Accumulated Knowledge, right? Like there are 3 other Accumulated Knowledges in your deck. With Council's Deliberation, if you're only playing the 4 Preordains, that is a 25% increase in cards that will trigger that extra card for you. So there's already an advantage there to that. So few games with Accumulated Knowledge, like, do you draw like a 3rd card off of Accumulated? Do you cast your like 3rd Accumulated Knowledge and draw like 3 cards off of it?
I can tell you from experience that like the AK on average when it's good is just 2 mana draw 2. Mm-hmm. Like instant speed, 2 mana draw 2. Like when you're doing that, you're probably in good shape, right?
Yeah.
It's like it's always the first one that feels anemic and sucks because you know that in order to cash it in later, you need to find another copy and then spend another 2 mana.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the other thing is the math on this is the second card is technically free. Like you were going to cast that Preordain anyways. So when you draw that second card, after you scry 2 and draw a card, then you get the trigger here and you draw another card. So the selection you're already getting off the Preordain is sort of doubled, especially if you're putting something on the bottom. You're basically getting to see that much deeper into your deck. So that's good all by itself. And it doesn't matter when you cast. Like you can hold your Preordain, I guess, to like get value out of like a Council's Judgment that you don't know is approaching. But like if your turn 1 play is Preordain, that's fine. And then you draw a Council's Judgment or you had one in your hand later, you can rifle that off. And then like later on down the game, you're gonna see another Preordain or not. Like you might not, but like more than likely you're gonna see another Preordain because there's so much air in your deck already. That second one, especially if you cast multiple Council's Judgment, that second one's gonna net you all the value that you lost.
Yeah.
You know, Council's Deliberation. Sorry, Council's Deliberation, not Council's Judgment.
Key things that you marked there are multiple copies of Council's Deliberation in your yard will trigger off the same preordain. That's
Yeah.
valuable, right?
Yeah.
The other thing now, let's just talk about raw cards that you actually look at when this goes off. Now, compared to Expressive Iteration, right, which was just banned,
3 cards.
Expressive Iteration, you get to look at 3 cards, and you get the 2 best cards in the scenario that you're in, right,
Sure.
for 2 mana. Now, that's also blue and red. And there were decks that literally stretched their mana bases just for red. Like the 4-color control decks, they stretched for red to play Expressive Iteration and Minsc and Boo. But they had to stretch harder into red because Expressive Iteration was part of their mid-game build plan in order to get to the end game of Minsc and Boo. So it's not like if they right now, the 4-color decks, they play like Staff of the Storyteller. So they're base Bant splashing red, right?
Yeah,
and
they're playing like plateaus and stuff.
The red splash is for Minsc and Boo and then sideboard cards. But in the when they sit down in the dark, they know that they don't need red until they're Minsking, right?
Yeah.
So they can just play a much cleaner mana base, like in terms of like setting up and not getting cut off their colors, because you don't have to fetch red early and then you can get cut off of a color. You know what I'm saying? Because if you're trying to get your first 3 land drops, you can do your spread to make sure that no color can get cut. Whereas if you have to go into 4 colors, you can't unless you're playing one of the tri-lands.
Yeah.
So,
especially because like your ideal turn 3 is like, is nothing bad is happening on your opponent's side of the board, and you cast Expressive Iteration. So you're already stretching your mana base really early in the game. So this allows you to not have to do that.
The point that I want to get back to about comparing this to Expressive Iteration, which I actually think is a pretty apt correlation, is Expressive Iteration, 2 mana, draw 3, look at the top 3, take the best 2, right?
Yeah.
Council's Deliberation on the front half is only draw 1, but then a preordain that you would cast otherwise anyway. That's the only concession is that you have to play preordain. But when you play that preordain, you get to exile this and draw a card, but the scry triggers after you resolve the preordain. Like this, the Council's Deliberation triggers after you resolve the preordain. So you get to scry first and then exile this to draw the second card. So if you think about, okay, I get to scry 2. If I put both to the bottom, I look at the 3rd card down and the 4th card down, which Expressive Iteration doesn't do. And in the event that I do want to keep one off the preordain, so I scry 1 to the top, leave 1 on the and put 1 to the bottom, I get to draw the card that I wanted off of preordain and then get a second card underneath below the card that I didn't want off of the Council's Deliberation. So in terms of selection, the combination between Deliberation and preordain, both of which are cards that aren't asking for too much in terms of your deck building considerations, is pretty comparable to.
I want to interrupt you with one point too, because there are going to be naysayers out there that say, yeah, but you cast Expressive Iteration and it's 1 card. You didn't like have to build anything together with it, but the opportunity cost there is so low in comparison. Not to mention the other point that I wanted to make about this card is the fact that nobody counters like 1/2 of a Think Twice.
This is insulated against counter magic. We'll talk about that in a second. The other point that I want to make about the selection comparable to Expressive Iteration, though, is there's 2 big points. One, Expressive Iteration is banned. It was one of the best.
You'll get DQ'd for playing that card.
Yeah. So like let's not like get in the weeds like Phil. It's not it's not exactly expressive. It's not quite. Yeah, obviously it's banned. But like this is I feel pretty close. Given A, it's an instant, and B, if you get your Expressive Iteration pierced or flustered or whatever, nobody is trying to trade their counter magic for the front half of this thing twice when it's just going to sit in the yard and then be there for another card anyway.
Exactly.
So it's pretty insulated against counter magic. It's at instant speed, and paired with preordain, it does pretty good imitation of selection in terms of card quality, the same way that Expressive Iteration would. Now, the additional part of that is Expressive Iteration also meant that there were some times where Expressive wouldn't necessarily net you the 2 cards that you wanted, or the timing of the card wasn't as optimal unless you were like specifically looking for your land drop. Where
maybe you drew 3 dazes and you're like, I don't need these.
How many times have yes, obviously Expressive Iteration was great, but we've all had the times where both we casting it and our opponents casting it have just put a card to exile because they either whiffed on the land that they were looking for, or they found spells that didn't line up with the board state that they were currently configured in. So the pros and cons, we could talk for hours about them, but Council's Deliberation plus specifically preordain is really close. It's really close. This is the card that I'm most excited about. I have my preordains ready to go. I'm going to get.
I need to get some better looking preordains. They've got those. I'll put it up here. They've got those sweet old bordered ones from the Urza and Mishra decks. I'm in. I need to go get those.
I have an altered set of the
course you
Venser preordains. So the old Venser preordains,
altered ones,
I think those are sweet. So the only thing I'm hoping for with Council's Deliberation at this point is I am sold that it is good and that it is legacy playable and that it will be a role player in the types of decks that people are looking for raw cards. Particularly if the format is conducive to allowing for the time to draw cards, right? Like if we're in a very combo centric metagame, like you may not have time to do this. But in the world that I think we're going in, where a lot of the cards in this particular set are leveling up decks that I think are going to be conducive to raw cards actually being really valuable. And this card, the only thing I hope for with Council's Deliberation at this point is that we get some sweet alt art that like every other card seems to be getting in the set, so I don't have to play with, you know.
I could come up with some ideas for you to get this altered, though. That's for sure.
I mean, if I get it altered, it's just going to be an extension of the thing. But like,
fair.
I mean, hopefully we get like these, you know, they have like these sweet altered, you know, alt art, whatever, for every single card, even the uncommons and commons. So like, hopefully they just do that for that too, and we get to see it. But Council's Deliberation is sweet. It's an uncommon. Pick up your set. It's going to be a legacy staple.
Final note: the only real drawback is you kind of in the decks that you don't need all that air, you do have to not play Ponder.
I don't think that
you don't have to not play Ponder, but like in decks that you don't need like 12 plus air cards, because you're going to play Brainstorm, obviously, right?
You're obviously playing Brainstorm.
Yeah. So for me, for the decks that I play, I don't want 16 draw a card cards in my deck. I probably want 12. So that, you know, it's going to be more on that.
The thing that I think is interesting about Council's Deliberation is that, like, at de facto at face value, when we don't think too deeply, the first thing that we conclude is like, oh, you got to play 4 preordain when you're playing Council's Deliberation, and therefore that has to come at the cost of playing Ponder. And I'm also thinking to myself, I'm like, bro, you can just play Council's, like, for me, I mean, I'm thinking through a different lens because I like instant speed card draw for miracles. But like, if I'm looking at this card, if I cast 2 copies of this in a game, if at any point I find a single preordain, that preordain has leveled up substantially, right? If I have 2 of these sitting in my graveyard and I cast a preordain, that's Ancestral Recall.
That is right? You got Ancestral Recall at home.
But that's why I don't think it's necessarily like, oh yeah, you have to play 4 preordain. You could play just some number of additional preordain on top of your Brainstorms and Ponders on top of Council's Deliberation, and then when you find the preordain, which you want to cast after a Council's Deliberation anyway to cash it in, like maybe you actually only do want 2 or 3 because you want to count the Council's Deliberation in the yard first to get the huge payoff. And then even if you only have 1 or 2, if you're playing some number of Snapcaster, you can Snapcast the preordain back, and then that will again trigger the Council's Judgment still in the yard. Like there's a lot of layers to think about beyond just, oh, I have to play 4, therefore that means that Ponder has to get the cut. I don't think that's true. I think that like there's a lot of tuning that can happen, and Council's Deliberation is strong enough on its own as long as you have some number of preordained somewhere in your list that it's a powerful enough payoff in the 2-drop slot.
Well, this is, I think, only the beginning of our deliberation on Council's Deliberation.
I think the card is so sweet. It's so cool.
So
and like anytime we get any, like now, it's like if this is playable, any cheap thing that says Scry from now on with an incidental effect, like that's the one thing too. It's like preordain is the only one that's legacy playable right now. But if we get, you know, make a 1/1 with some kind of effect that's valuable, or like you know, ping a thing, scry 2 or whatever, like incidental scry with this, meaning that everything that has scry could also mean draw card is tacked on, is really that like. I'm going to be looking at those cards now in a way that I never did before. Yeah.
Well, so with that said, let's talk about our second card that is beginning to make waves in the Twitter sphere, Orcish Bowmasters.
Yeah, you and I are on a little bit of opposite ends of the spectrum here. We both agree that it's legacy playable, but you think it's a role player, and I think it is format overhauling.
I mean, I think it definitely looks like it has legs. And on my first read, I read to player. It is to any target, so that does change my calculus a little bit for it. But I still think
let's just tell people what it is for people who haven't seen it yet. I'm sure you have, but like just in case, it's a 1/1 for 1 and a black with flash. When it ETBs or whenever an opponent draws a card outside of the one in their draw step, you ping something and create an army. You amass Orcs 1.
That, you know what? That adds so much to it that I wasn't even like putting into my head. When it enters the battlefield, it does this.
Yes.
That's wild. You know what? Like, again, like I still think it's only going to be a role player, but this card just keeps getting better every time I read it.
Think about it like this. Okay, let's think about. So I've seen people saying that this is just going to make Delver be Grixis Delver, like de facto Grixis Delver.
Mhm.
This is a combo card. Like you do this with your Echo of Eons, and your opponent draws 7 cards. So you ping them for you dome them for 7. Put 8 power on the table.
7/7. Yeah.
This is the legacy rate Shieldred, and Shieldred's already playable.
Yeah.
So tell me a matchup. Let's say just de facto, right? Before we dive in too deep on like, archetypes that this could spawn. You just slot this in the 2-drop stop. You are now Grixis Delver.
Yep.
What matchups don't you want this in?
I think you don't want it against 8-cast.
What are you talking about?
What? Because of my draw twos? The draw twos are fine. It doesn't make any difference.
Draw twos, it's whenever you draw a card outside of the draw step, every single bauble, dome you for 1, amass 1.
Okay.
Hit all of your Thopters.
Okay.
Hit your
for what it's worth. As a player of that deck, I generally don't use my baubles that often to draw cards. Like the baubles are there for Metalcraft and to improvise, and occasionally like I'll use them to draw cards. But most games end with me having the baubles still sitting on the board, doing basically just bring down the cost of my other cards. Now,
dude,
will
Delver's the fucking aggro deck, bro.
Thoughtcast get me? Yes, Thoughtcast is going to get me. I just feel like this card isn't fast enough for 8-cast. It's there. It does a little bit of work. It's going to create some blockers, but I don't think it's doing enough against 8-cast. And prove me wrong, please.
Dude, I can't believe that your take is that it's not good against 8-cast. Think one by itself
it's fine.
Is already
I just wouldn't be like, oh, 8-cast, I got him.
One of these by itself is going to tax all of those cards in a way that you're going to be punking the life total incidentally. That now they only have to care about making sure that a Shadow Spear doesn't connect. Which there's a whole nother card that we weren't planning on talking about it, but it's a quick one. We can talk about it later. It's called Cast into the Fire. But this is at first rate, it's all the cards that you draw against 8-cast, plus being able to ping Thopters or take down an additional Emery, additional bodies to get into combat, to chump constructs while you just and then you keep amassing again to make more bodies. Yeah. This in multiples, pinging twice, keeping everything off the board.
is a problem. Obviously, you need to counter those.
I was talking about this. I think it was one of the Discords that I'm in, but I forgot exactly which one. But people were like, "Yeah, it's good. It's not great against the non-blue decks." And I was like, "Not good against the non-blue decks? Have you read this card? You play this against elves by itself before they do anything. It shoots down an elf, makes additional bodies, and they can't glimpse. Yeah. You want to play against the green deck? This thing is going to punish their
it's amazing against elves. I would never say that this is not good against elves.
It's amazing against elves. It's going to punish the people's Sylvan libraries. It's going to be against endurance. It means that your bolt plus this thing pinging it for 1 gets to trade at parity plus board advantage at instant speed. You want to play against combo? Nice Grizzlebrand, idiot. Flash this shit in. Take a bajillion, make an 8/8.
And kill your Grizzlebrand, probably.
It's good against everything, dude. Did you take half of your life total off of a fucking Doomsday? Flash this in. Nice cantrips that you're trying to go off for free, doming you all the way down to fucking 0, idiot. This card is good against everything. It's good against every deck. It's good against every playable deck except for maybe Initiative.
I'm swayed from being here on it to now being closer to you about here on it. I still think that look, I would, if I was going to play Grixis, I would play this. If I might throw this into what do I take out of Death Shadow to add this in, right? Do I want to play less Murktides? I don't think so.
No, you're not going to play Murktide. Still insane. But also this against any Planeswalker. Flash this in, ping your Narset. That throws off the numbers. Play this. Okay, what's your Teferi going to do? I have 2 bodies on the table. You're going to bounce 1, draw, and then kill itself?
Yeah.
Or you're going to bounce the thing and then still have the 1/1 on the table.
We're going to get to a point where in a year, in a year's time, this card's going to get banned because every deck in the format is playing it, and it's just whoever can resolve the second one wins.
Here's the thing. The battles of you play your Bowmasters, I'll play mine, ping yours. Yes, that will be a relevant thing. I can't stress enough when people start playing this card how many triggers people are going to miss. You're just not going to realize how frequently this thing will trigger to ping something and then either build your body or make a body.
Yeah.
Like, it is awesome. Like,
I think
the value that's
this
tacked
is one of
on-
the few times where the amass situation is actually good. Creating a bigger creature as opposed to more creatures is actually better here.
It does both. It
Well,
builds
no, what
two
I'm
bodies.
saying is amass just adds to the same thing.
Yes.
It goes tall instead of going wide. Like, it doesn't create like another orc. You know, it just creates one bigger orc.
Yes, it's not a young pyromancer.
So
Yeah.
I like that here because the fact that this card exists means that your opponent would just play it, kill yours, and like go keep going like that. Or eventually they would have they would basically have like air superiority against you and just like kind of ping off all of your guys, as opposed to eventually both of these get so big, the orc armies, that like they can't be shot down by the other bowmaster.
Yeah. There's also the incidental value in certain positional advantages, right? Your opponent plays in Minsk, they try and plus on their boo, you flash in, kill their boo, have two bodies, like those types of incremental advantages. This card to me is pre-selling now for $40 for a reason. It is the mini shield dread. It will see play everywhere, and it will be good against things that you are not thinking about right now.
At least it's rare. It's not mythic, like, so like,
the other side of this too is that like everybody was like, oh man, this is the death of Delver. People are gonna play this, shoot down your one man thing, make another. It's gonna be played in Delver.
Yeah.
But what this card is good in both fair decks and combo decks, because you can just play this in your wheel deck and dome your opponent and make and just put lethal on the table.
Yeah.
But the value of this card making the body next to it larger, but the effect that matters is on the 1/1. So you want to point your removal at the 1/1, but then you're going to be leaving a body behind. And then that body can grow bigger. So you can also get into positions where if you have multiple in a game going long, you're going to have positions in combat where it's like, okay, I have the orc army, attack, you block, flash in, ping your thing, make my guy bigger, kill that thing. Like, this is like good
its own combat trick too. Especially if your opponent decides during combat that they need to cast Brainstorm or something, and you're like, haha,
the levels and the amount of positional play that this card offers, on top of just being good on rate at instant speed in both combo and fair, like, this card is nonsensically good.
I like it. I'm gonna tell you, you swayed me. This card is good.
Like, it's not.
Is it better than Council's Deliberation? I don't think so.
I think Council's Deliberation is a role player. Yeah. I think Council's Deliberation is a role player. Nobody's really going to change their play patterns to around Council's Deliberation. You're going to have to play differently with Orcish Bowmasters in the format. Like,
no, I agree. After discussing this with you, I think you're 100% correct.
Bowmasters is going to be the cause of people winning and losing a lot of games based on how they timed it and how you time your spells around a Bowmaster. Yeah. And if your opponent plays a Bowmaster and puts it on a stack and you get to respond to it and then not grow their thing, that will matter. Like, there's a lot of positional play to this card. I think we're only grazing the tip of the iceberg. I think this card should 100% be a 4 of in your collection, because it will be in a lot of different decks. And if anything, it'll be good in like, I get that like Plague Engineer has been the spot for, dealing with X1s and a lot of things, but like, you're just going to play this. Why would you not just play, the number of this and then kill the 1/1s that you care about, while also having a body that also hoses a bunch of other, like, I don't know. You're like, this just being good. Like, this is the type of thing where it's like, if this is popular enough, I could see people moving away from Grizzlebrand and Reanimator.
Wow.
Because they're just like, if they don't have removal, they just can't Grizzlebrand. Right?
They'll all be playing Atraxa, and our prophecy will have come true.
It's one of those things where, like, at the end of the day, you're probably still playing Grizzlebrand because it's good enough, but because this is the first time we've seen this kind of effect at 2. It's either on Hull Breacher or Narset, or like the punishing stuff at.
We're not punishing draws for this. Yeah, even opposition agent. Yeah.
This is the cheapest it's ever been. And
it's one in a black. It's not like 2 black like Dothy Voidwalker or anything. Like, this is very splashable. You're right.
But like if you're a reanimator player and you're like, oh, okay, if this is going to show up in a bunch of top tier decks that are just going to move into black to play this card, if I'm on the draw, right? If I have to grief that shit out of their hand, or I can't get Grizzlebrand if I go in Tomb, untap, reanimate, and they have 2 mana up.
Yeah.
What do? Either I discard it, in which case the game is slowed down, and so they'll have more looks at counter magic, or I just can't go for Grizzlebrand. I have to go for something else.
Yeah. Well, that brings us, I think, to our third card.
Yeah, our third card is, I think, the most boring of the 3 in terms of like what it's going to do. It's obviously going to be good. It's Delighted Halfling. It's green for a 1/2 mana dork that says tap, add colorless, or tap, add 1 mana of any color, spend that mana only to cast a legendary spell, and that spell is uncounterable. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things.
Cavern of Souls for Legends.
It's a Cavern of Souls. You're going to play this. You're going to play your Teferi or Narset on turn 2. It's going to be uncounterable, and that's just going to be it. And that's about the extent of the card. Like, I don't think this card's powerful because that line is powerful.
Yeah.
But I don't think it's doing anything particularly interesting.
So do you think the thing that is interesting that it's doing is making Daze not as playable?
No, because it's like Council's Deliberation and Orcish Bowmasters, I think, are fun designs that are going to make their way into the format, because we just spent, how long did we spend talking about those cards?
Yeah.
44 minutes in ways where we're like, think about this idea and all the ways that this could work. And like the threads of how those cards could be powerful in the format in ways that are unique and interesting, and for stuff that we actively want, is super compelling. Yeah. Where this is a 1/2 that makes your shit uncounterable, and it's like, yep, this is going to exacerbate the die roll even further. And it's like, okay, if I'm on the play, I'm going to play this. I'm going to play my uncounterable 3-drop that's going to snowball advantage, and like, or I'm just going to play like my Minsk and Boo a turn earlier uncounterable and just like not care. And it's like, okay, we're just siloed again, and it's uninteresting. Like, it doesn't do anything interesting, this card. So it's powerful, but it's not doing anything fun.
Going back to the Orcish Bowmasters thing, what you were talking about before, it's actually interesting that the second copy of this is actually the preferred copy, right? Like, there's a rare chance that your opponent's going to have his second copy to play against you, but like the person who plays the second one of the game is going to be in a much more advantageous position than the person who plays the first one.
It depends. Like,
as far as exacerbating the die roll is concerned, that's kind of where I'm talking about. Is like, this is a slightly different situation.
Yeah, I think the difference though is that like Orcish Bowmasters could be good on turn 2 against dealing with their 1/1 or catching like their ponder on the play, but it's not necessarily like, oh, I have to play it immediately for it to be good. You can just not play it. You can sandbag and wait until
you can hold it and wait for a brainstorm. Yeah.
You can wait for a brainstorm. You can, like what we were talking about, of the positional advantages that you get in combat by like adding a ping to something and then getting another block or whatever. Like, stacking your damage based removal like a bolt on top of the ping. Like, those types of things matter. There are so many situations where the timing of a Bowmasters and how you decide to point the damage and how your opponent plays around it, if they're thinking about it, is super compelling. Like, the replayability on Orcish Bowmasters and all the variety of different ways that it's going to like influence a game and influence play is really fun.
Yeah.
Your Delighted Halfling on turn 4.
Delighted Halfling is not fun. No.
Your Delighted Halfling is good exactly on turn 1 and exactly when it makes an uncounterable snowball the following turn. That's it. Like, it does nothing else. It is a, like, Delighted Halfling is boring and dumb and it's powerful, but it's, in my mind, you have these two, I mean, not necessarily masterpieces, but like 2 incredibly interesting, thoughtful designs for Legacy in terms of Council's Deliberation and Orcish Bowmasters. And then this ham-fisted piece of shit, Delighted Halfling.
Yeah,
like, it is so vast in terms of like the quality of design between the 3 cards that we've talked about versus like the first 2 versus Delighted Halfling. Delighted Halfling is trash. Absolute trash. And the people who are like, let's throw this in the file, be ashamed. And the other 2, though, raises. Raises.
Here's the thing. So this is only 3 of the cards, and we're going to have the full set spoiler when we do that, but I wanted to make sure that we didn't go through everything in one go. I want to like have a legit like sit down. Maybe we'll invite somebody on for the actual spoiler. But we're just a little over halfway through the set as far as cards have been spoiled, and this has been like what 3 days since the spoilers have begun. So I'm super hyped.
And these are just cards that are like main deckable players in Legacy. This isn't even talking about the cards that are just levels up in terms of sideboard options. Like, real quick, because there isn't really much to talk about other than that it's an upgrade and what the format was looking for. Cast into the Fire, 1 in a red for an instant. It's choose one. It's a Forked Bolt or exile an artifact.
Exile an artifact.
Exile an artifact. Like, we were just talking about how Orcish Bowmasters is going to level up Delver in a bunch of ways. Guess what? Having your Forked Bolt at instant speed, which is a card Delver has already played against shit like Elves previously in the past, but also exile your Cauldra, exile your fucking Chalice of the Void so your Emery can't rebuy it, or just kill the Emery. Like, that card is hot. That card's going to show up in sideboards. Like, that's just an upgrade. There's not much more to talk about it beyond that. It's just good.
And like, look, in the future, you're going to see this and you're going to be like, oh yeah, and it also gets rid of my opponents with the One Ring.
And it gets rid of the One Ring, which is why
that's
why like exile into the fire, like flavorfully, it needs to deal with the One Ring, and the One Ring is indestructible. So this says exile. So like that's why it's there.
But because when we're talking about the menace that the One Ring becomes in the format, we're gonna have to play this card. Right?
The One Ring is going to be format overhauling in itself. But like Orcish Bowmasters as another way to punish that on top of it, like. I was talking about how the One Ring is going to overhaul the format in ways that people are not expecting. The card is obscenely broken, but like they recognized how, like, this is the thing. They definitely saw how broken the One Ring actually is by playing it a single time. Literally anybody who hasn't
one guy played it one time.
Anybody who hasn't proxied the One Ring once, literally sleeve it up, goldfish it one time, one game, cast it once. And you'll realize how degenerate that card is. It is obscene. But like, you can tell how much they respected how broken they made that card, because Cast into the Fire deals with it. Orcish Bowmasters punishes it. Like they have implanted a bunch of stuff to make sure that there are. They
don't want the limited format to just be I opened the One Ring and beat everybody to death. You know?
Seriously though, like, please sleeve up the One Ring once. Just sleeve it up once, play it once, recognize how broken that card is. But like, it is nice to see that there is ways to move it. Like, white already has
checks and balances.
Green has some shuffle effects for that stuff, but they have given red and black ways
Unravel
to punish that card
Aether.
as well.
That's the card you're talking about. Unravel the Aether.
I mean, the like, white has, like, I mean, there's shit like Council's Judgment and Unexpectedly Absent, and I get those cards suck, but like, we've reached into that shit before for difficult problematic permanents. But blue also has counter magic to fight over that sort of thing, whereas like the other colors don't necessarily. But yeah, I mean, this set so far, in terms of like, I think what we have seen so far is this feels like the return to the days where not every powerful card just like bludgeoned the format in a way that like made it worse. Like War of the Spark made it worse. Made it worse.
What is the main difference between this and every other Magic set?
No Planeswalkers.
No Planeswalkers, of course. But no Planeswalkers.
This is also the thing where we're like, the entire set that they've spoiled so far, I mean, we've only seen half, but what they have spoiled so far, everything is awesome. Every single card, even the not legacy playables, are awesome. And then there's like 5 or 6 like good legacy playables so far, and the only one that like One Ring is degenerate and broken. It's going to get banned in Vintage, or restricted in Vintage within 6 months. The other cards are good. Delighted Halfling's a piece of shit, but it's still playable, and the set is exciting. Chef's kiss.
Anyhow, I think that does it for us. If you found any value here, do all the things. Comment below if there's any cards that you think that we should definitely be highlighting when we do the spoiler, because I want to write all those down and have my thoughts together beforehand for that sort of stuff. That's kind of it for us this week. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll catch you next week.
Come on down.